Okay, are we ready?
Okay. Belonging. So if you looked up in the Oxford Dictionary, you'd find that belonging would mean that. However, I was interested in belonging itself.
I can't see that far.
I was interested in answering aliens caused to feel isolated, lose the support of sympathy. Because you see, in the context of what the students will be studying about belonging, in short, I paraphrase it to belong is to be accepted within a community. And therefore, the community gives you love, and in return you receive love. See, to be in a community, however, it also means that you get a sense of security and fulfillment, and you get connections with people, places, groups, perhaps religion, maybe, but also you get a sense of identity, which is important. However, in my own personal experiences, from back when I was in my time, which you would all know being the principal, my name is Mary Warren. See, I discovered that belonging is not fields of flowers and meadows of green. Rather, there is a darker side to it. And if you see here, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a psychological concept, you see that belonging is on top of safety and physiological needs. What that suggests is that it suggests that one, depending on the peer pressure exerted by the community to belong or conform, may discard physiological and safety needs. For example, the anorexic, who discards the safety of good health and the need for food. Another example would be the child who clings onto the abusive parents. Similarly, I am an example of that. You see, back in the times recorded in the Crucible, I was only 17, and I was, I guess you could say, uneducated, and I was a servant to the Prophet family. Another thing was that I was friends with Abigail, but then as you remember in the beginning, I watched them dance. I didn't participate. So you can safely say that I was not really a member of the community, rather I was an outer member of the community. And this also ties in with my nature, which at the time was very weak-willed, although now I've reflected and I guess I've learned from my mistakes. See, to me, I wanted to be someone, which is why I was so happy to be in the court when Danforth and Haythorne had asked me to join them to testify Rebecca Nurse and so on. So to me, I wanted to belong, but the only way for me to belong, and the only way I knew, was to obey and conform. In other words, do what my occupation required me to do, which was to serve. Now, I remember though, apart from having that power to bring people to the death, essentially was what I was doing. I was also offered belonging rather than to the court, but to a more smaller, more closer community, which was Mr. Prophet's family. I remember when I was sent back to my home, or rather Mr. Prophet's home, he had told me to go to court, although with force. He had told me, and I remember him saying while we were at court, Mary, remember the angel Raphael, do that which is good. Now you see, this also ties in with the meaning of belong, that is to receive love and in return to give love. But also when Mr. Prophet had said that, it had given me a false sense, I would say, of security and fulfillment. Because you see, when he had said that, in my mind, I thought that he had implied that if I did say what I thought was the truth, which was that the girls were sporting, you see, I would essentially therefore make Mr. Proctor elated. I would free Guri Proctor, and therefore I would belong into their family. However, that's not the case, because if I was deemed lying, then I too would have been hanged along with Guri Proctor and Mr. Proctor. But it also meant, but another reason why I felt this urge to testify against the girls was also because of this same quote. By that I mean that if I were to tell the truth, I wouldn't just belong to the Proctor family, but I would belong to Christianity itself, because I would be redeemed in the eyes of God, and therefore accepted into heaven by telling the truth, by doing which is good. However, although I say this with remorse, yet not exactly regret per se, I also succumbed to Abigail and her minions, for lack of a better term, when they had accused me of being a witch, saying, I remember saying, and I say this with self-loathing and scorn to myself, and yet, as I said, not regrets. No, I love God. I go your way no more. I love God. I bless God. Abby, I'll never hurt you more. However, you see, then that would meant that I chose to belong within the small community of Abigail and her friends. And it also meant that I was in security of the majority, and that includes the power of the court. But as you know, that was wrong, and it's been 11 years since I was magically moved to the future. And that has meant 11 years of self-reflection within this brave new world of ours, which I am currently in. And I know, and I understand now that was an immoral choice, and yet I do have a sense of fulfillment, because if it weren't for that, if it weren't for me succumbing, I would be dead right now. And so I wouldn't be here talking to you all. And you see, upon my passage of time and fiction, through my ventures in time and fiction, I would say, that I also discovered many people, one of which was this little boy named PK from a fictional story called The Power of One. And as you can see here, this is a brief description, briefing of what exactly happens, and you can read that while I'm talking about it. But you see, PK he didn't belong either, but then he fluctuated from belonging to not belonging, similar to me. But also what was similar between the two of us was that our ways of belonging, my way of belonging was to serve. His way was, you could say, an elaboration of my way. You see, he had a knack for camouflage, which meant that he could be in several different communities and yet not be noticed by anyone. And this was, in his terms, for the purpose of survival. So, but that also meant that rather than being accepted into the community like what I did, he melded into the community, like how a chameleon melds into its background. You see, what this also meant, that it also revealed to me that belonging it isn't like pop music where you have set formulas, verse, chorus. Rather belonging was a flexible matter, and it cannot be done with such formulas or tactics. And this is very evident in PK's ventures through South Africa. For example, towards the beginning of his story and towards the beginning of his life, you see, he was the youngest. he went to an African boarding school where he was the youngest and he was the only Englishman. And this was during World War II, remember? And so he was repeatedly tortured, beaten up, and he was ostracized from everyone. And you see, so he essentially didn't belong. But then what he did was, he did his little magic, camouflage. And what happened was, he didn't necessarily belong, so to speak. Rather, he became unnoticed, and he started getting beaten up by other people, except for the judge, who was his nemesis. Now, you see, but he did belong to the judge in a way that he secretly helped the judge with his homework. And this is his way of giving love to the judge, and in turn, the judge wouldn't give him as harsh torture or beatings, which is his way of giving love. And it also meant that if the judge was successful in his final year exam, he would move out of the school, and so PK wouldn't have his torture with him anymore. A second example, which completely contrasts the first example, is when he was at the Prince of Wales High School, where essentially what happened is because the judge wasn't there, he allowed his intellect and his sporting ability to flourish. And because of that, he excelled so far ahead of everyone that no one would notice him. And that in itself is the same as belonging, because he's giving love to the community. In other words, the school, by giving the school, I guess, a higher ranking, you would say. And in return, they would give him what he wanted, which is, for example, a teacher that he could talk to intellectually, a friend that he could also talk to intellectually, and also to the people he didn't like to leave him alone. You see, and I believe that towards the end of the story, he mentioned something that I believe is quite important, and I guess you would say is the crux, the epitome of his ability for camouflage. He says that I had become an expert in camouflage. My capacity, in other words, intelligence, allowed me, chameleon-like, to be to each what they required me to be. You see, what this meant was that what he was saying basically was that in order to survive the system, he had to be highly adept to camouflage, and so much so that he would be able to submit his will towards others, hence his melding into the community, like how a chameleon melds into the background and convincing therefore its predators that it is not there. However, towards the end of his story at that time, when he was 17, albeit a lot more mature than I was when I was 17, he also questioned his need for camouflage. And so, he questioned his need for camouflage because he noticed that other people play a heavy role in his destiny. And yet he wants to harness the power of one, which is one's inner mind, in order to create his own destiny. And so this essentially means that he chooses not to belong. And if we look back here at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see that self-actualization and esteem, respect by others, respect of others, confidence, acceptance of facts, for example, and morality, are above belonging. So if you can discard safely the physiological needs for belonging, you can do the same for self-actualization and self-esteem, which is what he chose to do towards the end of his story. While I was venturing through the passage of time and fiction, and that includes art and music, I had discovered a band named Macbeth and an album named Still Life. Now, what struck me about the album was the protagonist's lover, Linda, who who was placed in a similar situation to me, and also to PK. You see, Melinda did not belong in her society after her protagonist had left, but then she succumbed to the society by becoming a nun. And by that, it meant that her way of belonging was similar to my way. By that I mean obedience and conformity. However, she also has several similarities to PK in a way that, by that I mean towards the end of the album itself, towards the end of the story of the album, she decides to make her own decisions rather than let the Council of the Cross do it for her. And so she decides to commit suicide, and so does not belong to the community of the Cross, or rather Council of the Cross, but rather belong to the protagonist in death. Right? And I think it will be important to focus on the song "Benighted," which is the fourth song in the album now. Now, the reason why I do this is because it is again the epitome of the concept of belonging within the story of the album. You see, an important motive in this song is "Come Into This Night." Now, see, the protagonist in this song, which is meant to be an ode to his love of Melinda. He repeatedly mentions "Come Into This Night." For example, "Come into this night and we run." "Come into this night when days are done." "Come into this night and we'll be gone," for example. Right? He uses the metonymy of the darkness that night brings. You see, what that meant was he wanted her to discard her current place of belonging, which was in this theocracy, and let the darkness embrace her, and so let the darkness embrace both of them together, which meant that they would renew their old sense of belonging, which was towards each other, their romantic relationship towards each other. But it also meant to embrace new, unknown, different kinds of different places, groups, peoples of belonging as well. And thus, darkness would be, rather than something that strangles, like the Council of the Cross, rather it will be something that embraces. Now, another example of her way of belonging would be in the lines, "What came into your sight, saw you united by the fright." Basically, this line itself personifies the distortion, although this distortion in this particular line is an abstract concept. In reality, we know that it is actually the Council of the Cross. Now, what the protagonist also does is he rhymes sight with fright, which is important because what he's therefore doing is he's accentuating the malignity of this personified abstract concept, the distortion. Now, this suggests that she was similar to me in a way that she is weak-willed like me, and that she had succumbed to the pressure of the majority. In other words, the distortion in this case, because it's theocracy, religion. So, all in all, she was very similar to me in the way that she's weak, and yet she, unlike me, during the recordings of the Crucible, she grew up and chose her pride over her life. And so now, I will not give you a conclusion, which will be a summation of everything that I've said. Rather, because within this brave new world that I'm currently in, which I do not think I would like to go back. So, I don't want to go back to the theocracy. I would prefer prefer a moral conclusion rather than a summation, which would be this. So if you'd like to read it. Basically what it means is, towards the ending especially, positive discrimination is discrimination. Equality is about treating everyone equally. So as you can see, what this poster is trying to advertise is a global community, a global sense of belonging, where there's no differences whatsoever.